I've gathered the best tips for playing against killers from the best players in the Dead by Daylight scene. We're talking about dedicated players with thousands of hours, content creators, comp players, and even world record holders. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the 3 best counters for every killer. Trapper by Hybrid Panda. The Trapper will often spawn away from the survivors. Normally, a good Trapper would take this time to set up, especially in the area that he's around. Keep note of this, and once he leaves, it's your time to get into that area and disarm absolutely every trap. Getting into an early chase with the Trapper is absolutely phenomenal because it stops him from getting any good setup time. This will force him into a chase and his power will be completely useless. If you're ever in a chase with the Trapper and he decides to place down the trap, whether this is a fake or not, just leave the loop completely. You can sometimes get away with dropping the pallet if the trap is in the middle of it, but for the most part, you would just want to leave that loop because chances are it's going to be a dead end. You can actually disarm the trap and let someone run through this. This is a very convenient way for survivors to essentially get out of tight situations, especially when the Trapper has you locked down. Don't forget that you can also cancel this and have the Trapper run into this as well, which is quite amusing, but still a pretty good play. Wraith by Virtual Blight. If you see the Wraith and he is currently cloaked and you expect him to vault a window, you can actually vault into him to waste a bit of his time. Same can be said for dropped pallets. You can slow vault over these to waste some time. This way the Wraith can actually break the pallet or vault the window because you will be in the way. Wraith makes a very noticeable crackling sound when he's in cloak, which if you look out for, you can always hear when he's coming. This way you don't need to just rely solely on your vision, but you can listen for the audio cues that indicates that he's around. If you ever see the Wraith is cloaked, do not drop any of the pallets. The best thing to do here is get to a loop if needed or use a vault, but never ever drop any pallets when the Wraith is cloaked. Hillbilly by Rapid Main. If a Billy is trying to curve you, it's definitely recommended that you flare out so that way, if they try to curve you, they're more than likely to miss because you decided to flare. Billy's charge time, chainsaw speed, and chainsaw cooldown are very quick when he's on overdrive mode. If for any reason you're looping a Billy while he's on overdrive, play everything safe, pre-drop if you need to, because when he's in overdrive mode, it's going to be extremely difficult to combat. Tight loops and sharp corners are your best friends. Keep in mind that Billies will also anticipate your movement, so sometimes trying not to counter them as well is a good option. All in all, use these to your advantage, and if you're doing it too much and Billy's starting to catch on, then do the opposite. If you're in a situation where you're guaranteed to die, try crouching. Sometimes the hitboxes honestly mess up. This is pretty weird and it doesn't work 100% of the time, but if you're gonna die anyways, you might as well try it. Nurse by Super Alf. Run the edge map against the nurse as much as possible, and you can try to use this with multiple rocks, Z-walls, and trees. That way it messes up the nurse's blink because if she's aiming at a wall, she doesn't go super far with her blinks. When running away from the nurse, try to block line of sight as much as possible. You can walk after this as well to try to trick her. For instance, if you run in one direction, she loses line of sight, you can simply slowly walk back into her and she'll over-teleport anticipating where you're going to be, and in reality, you're in the completely different direction. If you can, always try to force the nurse to use her second blink. This will put her on a longer cooldown, and if she decides not to let everything cool down, she'll only have 1 blink for that chase, which is much easier to deal with than 2 blinks. Myers by Stocky Boy. This one's pretty obvious, but just don't feed Myers at all. Even if you're super confident in your own chase ability, this is just gonna doom your team in the long run by allowing Myers to build up his power and possibly just snowball everybody onto the ground. On the opposite, if you've been stalked quite a lot, this is your one and only time to essentially help the team. You need to pester Myers as much as you can, as he can't really gain stock on you. so chances are that he can't tear up on you, and if he commits to the chase, he won't be able to do it on anybody else because he's preoccupied with you. If you're running away from Myers, you need to treat him like a ranged killer, such as the Huntress. Hide behind trees, walls, whatever you really can use to prevent him from building up stock. And again, just like the first tip, don't feed him. If you're by a loop where he can easily just look at you, get out of there and get to a safer spot. A bit of an obvious one, but play things extremely safe in Tier 3. At base, it'll be 60 seconds, and there's add-ons that can extend this, so keep that in your mind. Greed as much as you can, especially if you're about to go down and you think the power's about to run out. It's better to save yourself than to get it down, which can snowball pretty badly. Hag by Gummy Peach Rings. As a survivor, you can crouch over the traps and then wipe them away. This is pretty known, but shockingly enough, not as well known as you may think. So in case you didn't know, simply crouch over to the trap. This won't trigger it whatsoever, and you can actually wipe it away. That way the hag can no longer teleport to it. Harassing the hag's traps is the best way to deal with her power. It's really easy to do this when she's very far away from the traps, in a chase elsewhere, and especially when she's carrying or hooking somebody. You can also do this when she immediately places the trap down if you're confident in your ability. A bit of a complex counter, but you can counter the hag's traps by walking directly into them with your camera aimed behind you. The hag's traps will always swing your camera to look at the fake hag or the phantom. Having your camera looking behind you while running towards the trap will automatically turn you 180 degrees and you'll start running away from the trap. Doctor by Herman the Doctor. As soon as you hear the Doctor's terror radius, get out of there. Remember that the Doctor has static blast, which means if you're in his terror radius, you will be revealed, so getting out of his heartbeat at all times is the way to go. If you happen to use Calm Spirit as well, this is exceptionally well because you won't actually scream. Whenever you're in loops, especially some of the more unsafe loops, make sure you're pre-dropping the pallets. If you manage to get shocked at an unsafe loop, you're more than likely to be injured, so pre-dropping is definitely the way to go. Possibly the most important thing to do with Doctor is extending your loops with other loops. You don't want to stay at one of them for an excessively long time, even if it's a strong loop, because one good shock will get you out, so make sure you're extending the loops with other loops. If you manage to figure out the timing of his static blast or even see him getting ready to do this, hop into a locker ASAP. This will completely negate you from screaming, which is a plus on the stealth side. Huntress by 7cm Princess. If the Huntress is trying to mind game you, be patient on your loops and bait her into some bad shots. A great example of this is when you're in the killer shack and she looks through the window trying to get that perfect shot on you when you re-enter the killer shack. Just wait a few seconds and she'll end up taking a bad shot trying to get you, and you make it extend the chase. Greed your pallets. Most of the time, the Huntress will aim up at a pallet thinking you're going to drop it. So if you greed them and continue to run, this works especially good when you're even injured because they think you'll play it more safe, it ends up working. Now, obviously, if you're doing this excessively, she will eventually know, so be ready to drop it a few times after greeting. Don't make your pathing extremely obvious with the Huntress. If you're running directly to a vault, in the last second, dodge left or right, and sometimes in anticipation, she might toss a hatchet, giving you some extra time. Leatherface by Spook and Jukes. Windows are going to be your bread and butter. If you stay close to them and run them tightly, you can eventually just force an M1 rather than getting one-tapped by the saw, so make sure you're vaulting those windows and running all of your loops extremely tight. Try to time a pallet stun the first time the Bubba uses the chainsaw sweep. If he waits it out and respects it in order to break the pallet, you'll know you'll have to greed pallets and use that as a mind game. Do not pre-drop, because if the Bubba just breaks the pallet, it's a GG's because you're more than likely going to die. A bit of an obvious one, but do not go down near the basement. If you feel that the down is coming and you're about to die, stay as far away as possible from the basement, because if you go down there, it is pretty much a GG's for you and anyone trying to save you. If there is nothing else that you can do, jumping in a locker might just save your life. If you time it properly, you can jump out at the appropriate time to continue and extend your chase, but this is a very, very last resort. Only use it when you really have no other options. Nightmare by Sunshine's Journey. One of the things that Freddy's do best is keeping pressure on those generators, which can oftentimes force you in a pretty bad 3-gen. Keep this in mind from early game to make sure you are not 3-genning yourself, because in this situation, a 3-gen will be very, very dire, because Freddy can just teleport to any of these generators and it's pretty much a GG's. So make sure you're keeping in mind what generators you're working on. On the topic of generators, make sure you're splitting up and not working on a gen with someone in order to split the gen pressure. Remember, Freddy can only teleport to one gen at a time, and this also has a cooldown, so if everyone's working on separate generators and he teleports to one of them, he can't stop everybody from working on the generators, so make sure you're splitting up when working on them. If you notice that your Freddy is baiting a lot of the teleports, just don't leave. Oftentimes, Freddy's might even run the add-on that shows them teleporting. I oftentimes don't leave whatsoever, even if he fully teleports. And if he ends up actually teleporting, keep in mind that his POV is locked in, so you do have time to adjust. So all you need to do is just keep working on that generator, and more than likely if he's faking it, you'll be safe, and those precious seconds can add up. The Pig by Scorpions. If you notice the pig is trying to mind game you by crouching at a loop, all you need to do is run away. By the time they crouch and uncrouch, it actually gives you enough time to make it to another loop, a vault, or a safer location. Never 99% the generators. Keep on working on them and popping them. Sometimes this can completely backfire, and the pig can use any perks in her arsenal to completely destroy all the progress you have on the gens, so pop them ASAP. It's not that hard to remove the traps. Remember that if you actually have a trap on your head, even if it's activated, you can still get out through the hatch, you can crawl out, or if the trap was placed after the last gen was popped, you can actually just walk out the front doors. Clown by H Phoenix. You don't need to go out of your way to avoid the clown smoke. Sometimes it's best to just go through it, get to the pallet, and drop it, instead of avoiding it, running into a dead zone, and getting injured. Do not underestimate the power of W. Getting distance is your best bet against the clown. You can combine this as well with very long chained loops. Clown has pretty poor map pressure. You can use this to your advantage. Split up with your team and work on gens as quickly as you possibly can. That way, if one person's in chase, you still have adequate time to get the generator done. Spirit by JRM. When you're playing against a spirit, look at it as almost if you're playing against the Oni. Once you get hit, the game is much harder, as you're now injured and you're easier to locate while she's phasing. So by all means, play stealthy and avoid getting hit, especially when you hear her phasing in your area. If you do manage to get injured, you can try crouching to be a little bit quieter, so your best bet is just to stay out of harm's way. You can try to mind game her after she started phasing by dropping the pallet on the side closest to you, then fast vaulting. This will make her think that you've pulled the pallet the normal side and vaulted over, when in actuality, you've vaulted it to safety. You can bait the spirit by waiting by pallets, leaving scratch marks near them, and then slowly walking away. If you have some good timing and you can anticipate when the spirit is going to be right in front of you, you can actually try to stun her while she's phasing. Legion by Potato Legion. The very second you hear any type of rock and roll music, aka that terror radius, you need to get distance immediately from your teammates. It's vital that you split up for a majority of the match to make the Legion's power as useless as possible. Do not heal unless you have healing perks or you happen to be by 2 people so you can heal quickly. It's pretty counterintuitive to heal when playing against a Legion, because most of the times they're just going to stab you with their Feral Frenzy quite quickly, so only do this if you have any good healing perks or there's 2 or more survivors around you to heal you really quickly. If you have the opportunity to stun the Legion with a pallet while they're in Feral, do it. It is extremely hard to do, but it's also the most annoying thing to deal with as a Legion. One way you could do this is by waiting at the pallets, and as soon as they decide to swing, dropping it on them, forcing that stun. And of course, stay away from your teammates. Most of the maps in the game are pretty big, so split up, so that way the Legion cannot actually make it to another survivor to change their hits. So you're going to want to stay away from everybody so you don't put anyone in danger's way. The Plague. Don't cleanse. It's very, very simple. Do not cleanse whatsoever once you're playing against a plague. This is just going to power her up more and more. The more you give her the power, the more it's going to snowball on you. So just don't cleanse whatsoever. Treat her as if she's just your standard 115 killer, and you'll only have to worry about maybe at maximum 3 vial purges, and that's only if she's running the 2 add-ons. At base, there'll only be 1, which is only a one-time deal, and then you treat her like a normal killer. As soon as you cleanse, she can continue to rinse and repeat with this power, and then everybody has to cleanse, and most of the time, survivors are on the same page of not cleansing, so don't cleanse. Whenever she's puking, especially in Vial, you can crouch behind objects, and there's often times where the box does not register her hit whatsoever. Especially if you're cutting around corners as well, and then you decide to crouch, chances are she won't be able to hit you with it. This works especially good in Chase as well, because once she's actually puking, she can't swing her weapon, so crouching isn't the worst thing to do, and it can oftentimes save you from being downed or infected. If you ever have the opportunity to stun the plague while she's corrupted with her Vile Purge, make sure you're doing so. This will completely kick her out of her power, which gets rid of an entire pool of her power, which is super duper good. Ghostface by SK. If you're trying to reveal Ghostface, make sure that he's in the center of your screen and enough of his body is actually visible in order to do so. A lot of people get confused on how to actually reveal Ghostface, and this is the properly way of doing it. If you have a feeling that you're about 99% stock and Ghostface is just waiting in order to hit you, you can always force a hit by him. It's especially easy to do this when he's carrying someone to a hook, and this way your stock will be reset and he won't go down in one shot. Another good strategy to reveal Ghostface is by hiding behind something that he can't stalk behind. If you see that one of your teammates are exposed, be a team player and try to take a hit for them. Demogorgon by Monster Kill Demo. Pathing is the most important thing that you need to keep in mind when playing against a Demogorgon. Loop in a way where the Demogorgon can't really get any line of sight on you. Avoid getting zoned by his mouth. A lot of Demogorgons will try to open their mouth to make you go away from a pallet or a vault, and sometimes they are actually out of range of hitting you. So don't get zoned by him and run into awkward positions, because if you do, you're just playing into their hands. If the Demogorgon placed a portal, and this is now in low activity area, for example if he placed one next to a generator that's now popped, you can actually just leave it there. The Demogorgon can't retract any of his portals, so if it's in a bad position, that's one less portal that you need to worry about on the map. Oni by Lippy. Healing as quick as possible and as effectively as possible is going to be ideal. Remember, the Oni charges up his power by collecting your blood, so it is really important that you heal as soon as you can. Think about it the opposite way of Legion. With Legion, you don't want to heal at all. With Oni, you want to heal almost immediately when you have the opportunity to do so. It's best to know where to run in advance. A lot of maps have some maze tiles, and those are the ones that most Oni struggle with. You can think about those tiles on Ormond, Garden of Joy, Yamaoka, and some other maps that have unique tiles that makes it too complicated for an Oni to dash around. These are the ones that you're going to want to keep in mind and use them as your exit strategy. Combine this with weird and confusing pathing as well to avoid the Oni getting some easy hits on you. If you have the opportunity to do so, try to mind game his flick. For example, you can run left and then run right to bait him into one direction. This works extremely good as well with pallets and vaults, where you can fake going to it and then running the other way. Deathslinger by Osu. If you need to make it to a certain location to break line of sight, such as a pallet or a vault or even a jungle gym, do not stray left and right. This actually slows you down and allows a Deathslinger to catch up. Remember, depending on the Deathslinger's range, it'll be harder to dodge the closer he is. So if you're caught in the open, it's best to move towards your target location and wait for a moment you believe he's about to fire to crouch or bank left or right. Do not sway to avoid his hit. If you're looping tiles that are shorter than you as a survivor, keep in mind that the Deathslinger can shoot over them. If you do find yourself at these tiles, try to be unpredictable with your looping. Stopping your movement or even changing directions while he's ADSing can cause a Deathslinger to miss. Pallets are going to be your strongest tool when playing against a Deathslinger, and pre-dropping it is the worst thing that you can do while you're fully healthy. If you're healthy, avoid dropping pallets too early in the chase. It's better to try to greed the pallet as much as possible to waste the Deathslinger's time. It's very similar to Huntress in that regard, so keep that in mind. The Executioner. Whenever you're looping, and especially when there's no line of sight, try to loop wide instead of being too predictable, especially when going into certain areas that he's more than likely to use the rights of judgment. If you ever notice the trail of torment or the giant pools of blood everywhere, you can actually crouch over them so you don't get inflicted with it. If you ever find yourself being tormented, all you need to do to get rid of this is saving somebody from the cage. This one's a little easier said than done, but if you want to make sure that you're not being sent to the cage next, this is the way to do it. Holding W is not a bad idea. More than likely, the Executioner is trying to anticipate your directions and figure out where you're going, so if you're just holding W, sometimes they don't take this into account. They think you're going to loop, and they can sometimes miss their attacks. Blight by Lilith Omen. If the Blight is dashing, try to run around something. Remember, the Blight can't make a full-on 360 in one go, so if you run around a tree or a rock, sometimes they can miss their attacks. Breaking line of sight with sharp corners is going to be your best bet in a normal chase when the Blight is dashing. Now, Blight is extremely hard to go against, so it's not super simple to do, but this is one of the things that will help. If you time it properly, you can actually stun a Blight while they're rushing. That way, as soon as they're in the pallet, drop it down, and this will completely stop them in their tracks. Twins by Lynxie. Heal up as soon as possible. Victor can only down you when you're injured. If all of the team is injured, there's a chance that he just slugs and gets an easy 4K. So you want to make sure at least one person at minimum is fully healed. Crouch. If Victor is idle or attached to a teammate, he can detect you with Killer Instinct. But if you crouch, he won't hear you at all. This is a great way to just crouch up and kick him whenever you can. Don't forget that lockers are actually a safe haven. If you jump into a locker versus Victor, he can trap you in there, but this only lasts for 10 seconds. You also have to take into account the time it takes to switch from Victor to Charlotte, so if you're far away enough, jumping in a locker can actually be a great counterplay. Trickster by the Worst of White. Line of sight blockers are going to be your friends. Trees, rocks, walls, anything like that. Using even the smallest line of sight blocker can help when going against a Trickster, making it challenging for them to land their knives. This makes W keying a good strategy against him, depending of course on your game style. If you're by high wall tiles, try to greed. Pre-dropping can kill you in most cases because of the animation lock, so greeting pallets against a Trickster, especially one that uses their power often, can drag out a chase way longer, which wastes precious time. If you ever see the Trickster and you're out in the open, you need to get out of there ASAP. Find anything that you can possibly use, because with the new main event, if you are out in the open, you will get shredded very quickly. Map obstacles are going to be your friend 100% of the time, so even if it's not a line of sight blocker, as long as you're not completely stuck out in the open, you can still make a good play, especially in the case when he's using main event. Nemesis by Otstarva. If you find yourself stuck between a killer and a zombie, or even a breakable wall, or a healthy teammate, crouching can be a great idea. If the killer uses their tentacle, the hitbox will descend down and hit the tallest thing in front of it, meaning that if there's a zombie, a player, a breakable wall, and you end up crouching, it'll actually hit them instead of hitting you. Delaying the moment Nemesis hits tier 2 and tier 3 is the single most important thing that you can do as a team. Here's 3 ways that you can do this. You can split up very aggressively in the early game. If Nemesis cannot infect 2 different survivors quickly, his tier 2 will often take a much longer time to reach. Do not use vaccines until he hits tier 2 or even better, tier 3. Each time you use a vaccine, you remove the infection, but also make it so that he can reach the next stage of the mutation faster if he infects you again. In your first chase before tier 2 happens, do not be afraid to pre-drop pallets very early. Without tier 2, Nemesis has to break the pallets normally, and this will buy you and your team some extra time. If you're extremely confident that your team is doing a good job at splitting up as well, you can also let a zombie hit you and chase. This is very risky to do, but it also denies him 3 mutation points, which will keep him in tier 1 even longer. You can also use the zombies as a speed boost to reach the exit gates and endgame in scenarios. If you don't have a flashlight, pallet, or even head-on to remove a zombie, here's a little trick that you can do in order to avoid them. The Cenobite by Field Agent Reaper. The best time to solve the box is going to be when Pinhead is in chase. Don't pick up the box when Pinhead has recently seen you, even if he is chasing someone else, or when he is very clearly close by. Take the box to the secure location, quickly then solve it. Do not solve the box when you're on death hook unless it's 100% necessary. When in chase, if Pinhead actually uses his power, double backing if they go for quick chains or even running at the Cenobite will often make them whiff their shots. If you have a moment to solve the box and it seems like a good time to do it, do it. Stop waiting for someone else to do it, or you're just going to be in the whirl for hurt. Artist by Carnivius. Getting up in elevation on some maps like the Swamp or RPD can help if you're swarmed. Birds can't actually hit you on the higher elevation, so this is a neat trick. Lockers are a safe way to get birds off of you, only if the artist is far away. You don't want to jump in a locker right in her face, which happens very often. This one was a niche one, but in case you ever try doing this, you can no longer dispel the crows with flashlights, flashbangs, firecrackers, or party starters, so don't waste your time even trying. If you find yourself in a high target area like a generator, if you hear any crows whatsoever, run away from that area ASAP. Onryo by One Pump Willie. You can use the first 30 seconds of your match to find any of the TVs. As soon as the TV turns on, all 4 of you guys should ideally pick up the tapes. Now if you're in a Swift, this works great. If you're with randoms, do it yourself. Onryo can only teleport to one place, so only one person at a time may be interrupted with this. Look for white TV auras near your generator. If you see it, turn it off if you have low condemn. If you choose not to do so, you'll know the Onryo has actually teleported to that TV if the aura disappears. If you're about to be moried, don't panic. The new tape animation is literally just 1 second. If you're fully healthy, you can actually put away your tape in between getting hit, even if she has max saved the best for last. You may go down, but you're not actually dying, so having one hook is better than being completely moried. The Dredge by Gaming Athlete. You can actually tell when a Dredge is teleporting to a locker. This is extremely good when you're sitting on a generator such as the Killer Shack or anywhere. You can actually see the lockers shudder a little bit, and that way you'll want to move as soon as you see it. Only lock one lock per locker sets at a time, that way the Dredge can't break both. When looping against a Dredge with the Remnant or not, try your best to erratically move around the loops. Remember, the Dredge is going to try to mind game you one way or the other, whether that's teleporting to lockers, placing their remnants, and trying to catch you off guard, so it's your goal to mind game them yourselves and try to counter them by not doing super obvious things. Wesker by Scooty Booty. Always heal before disinfecting. Disinfecting gives your location to Wesker, so always heal first. Going off somewhere else to reset as well is a good idea instead of just doing it under the hook, especially if the Wesker is trying to tunnel. A big thing is actually flaring when playing against a Wesker. Moving outwards or inwards can be unexpected. You can oftentimes bait a Wesker to going through a window, which is actually quite comical, by quickly dashing last second to the left or the right and getting them to use their bound in order to try to get you while you're vaulting, but instead you didn't vault in reality. The Knight by Demi. If you're being chased by the Knight and the guard, or just the guard alone, pre-dropping the pallet will always make the guard go through it as long as you have a little bit of distance. This can actually buy you some valuable time if you're about to go down. But keep in mind, if you ever vault this pallet, they will go through it. You can use this to your advantage in some situations, but it is extremely hard to do that. So just pre-drop those pallets and this will constantly get you some more distance. With the most recent update to the Knight, the guards, if they're close to the Knight, will actually disappear 3 times faster. So if they are being used while in chase with the Knight, stay close to them because they're going to go away really quickly. Do not forget about the flag. As soon as you hear that horn going off, it means the flag has spawned, and if you can make your way back to it, grab it, you'll get a speed boost and that guard will be gone.
Line of sight is actually a thing that you can use against the guards. A lot of people don't notice, but even if you're in the radius, as long as the guards don't have proper line of sight of you, they won't actually attack you. Here's a good example of that in the background. Skull Merchant by Pixel Bush. When the drone beams can't scan you, you see them as white instead of orange. This will happen whenever you're standing still, crouch walking, or during the 3-second immunity window. So if you get scanned, you can use those 3 seconds the power gives to unzone yourself. It doesn't matter if you run into the beam or even the drone itself during those 3 seconds, you won't be scanned again. In stealth mode, the drone beams will be invisible, but you can still see where they're pointing if you look at the 2 lights that the drones have themselves. One of these are coming out of the skull mount, and the other the back of his head. These drones spin slower than the scouting drones and are therefore less directly threatening, so keeping them in stealth mode is going to be ideal for you.
If you're already injured with 2 stacks of lock-on and you feel you're somewhere safe if the killer comes for you, intentionally getting claw trapped can let you reset your stacks back down to 0 without any fear of getting injured immediately again.
Remember, resetting at 2 stacks is dangerous because she can instantly injure you again, but by letting yourself get claw trapped and then running the battery out, it means that you'll be injured at 0 stacks, so it's an easier way to reset safely. Singularity by Coco Latte. If a teammate is being chased and you have an EMP, don't be afraid to run over and go and help them while they're being chased and using that EMP. This will force the Singularity to reapply the infection, which wastes time. If you notice that a survivor is slugged and they're also infected, don't pick them up from the dying state until you EMP them first, because if you do and they get back up, you're going to get infected as well. Speaking of infections, if you're the person and the survivor that's infected, try to stay away from anybody at all, that way they're not infected as well. And remember, obviously, use the EMP to get it off of you. Xenomorph by the Mr. Headache. Flame turrets aren't only for using in crawler mode. Many players think that flame turrets are completely useless because they don't always knock the Xenomorph out of his power. However, their main use is actually as placeable body blocks. The Xenomorph must deal with the flame turret upon seeing it, or they'll lose their power and they'll just be at 115 killer, which is far weaker. So breaking a flame turret buys only a handful of seconds, but those seconds can be precious. Survivors should place flame turrets anywhere another survivor body blocking in the moment would be helpful. The tail attack is reactable. Most survivors assume that the tail attack is not reactable and it's pretty much a GG's. While it's still very hard to react to, survivors can look for 2 of the following signs to anticipate a bait or dodge. The Xenomorph's tail physically rising before the attack initiates. There's also a very loud sound cue that plays for the tail attack windup before the hitbox even becomes active. You can use these 2 things to try to dodge it. Always place a flame turret before working on a generator. In addition to what we mentioned earlier being used as a viable body block, the flame turrets also work as a free tracking for the Xenomorph. The flame turrets tracks the Xenomorph for 41 meters regardless of stealth mode or not. So the flame turret will beep more intensively as the Xenomorph gets closer, functioning as an artificial terror radius. The Unknown by One Pump Willie. Try to juke the power by running back towards the unknown. Most of the times when the unknown decides to use their power, they're anticipating where you're going to be, so running straight back into them will oftentimes make them miss. Just don't do this at close range because you can get meleeed. Dispel the hallucinations when one of your teammates is being chased or hooked. This way, it ensures that you're not getting interrupted and getting teleported and eventually just getting hit. You can tell if the unknown can actually teleport to any of the hallucinations depending on if they're crouching or standing up. If they're laying on the floor, it means that the unknown cannot teleport to them whatsoever, but if they're standing up, chances are the unknown can teleport to them. So as mentioned before, only dispel those when you know it's pretty safe. Similar to other killers, split up. Don't stick next to your teammates because one good AoE shot will injure multiple people or get them infected, and this can occur very easily if everybody's on the same objective. So don't double, triple, or even quadruple up on these objectives. Do them by yourselves. That way, only one person at a time can get infected. Chucky. Chucky is really small, so it is really difficult to keep track of him. You're going to want to use the illusionary footprints or the red stain to keep your eyes on him. Now this is still extremely difficult to do because of how tiny he is, but these are the two ways that you can surely keep track of it. Chucky giggles, laughs, even trash talks quite a lot. Similar to the Wraith and his heavy breathing or Ghostface with the whooshing noises, this is Chucky's ambient noise. So especially if he's in hidey-ho mode, you can still hear him coming from a mile away because of this. So use this informational tool to your advantage. Since Chucky is extremely small, the unsafe loops are even more unsafe. It will be extremely easy for him to mind game you, so pre-drop as often as you can to ensure that he doesn't actually get a hit. Vecna. Pretty obvious, but always make sure that you're wearing 2 items. There's a bunch of chests that spawn around the map. Each of them have different abilities. I personally like the ones that show you where the giant orb is and the one where he's flying. Make sure you're wearing 2 of these items at minimum. If Vecna ever decides to call out his skulls, you can actually just crouch to completely avoid this. Even if it directly touches you and you're crouching, you'll be completely fine and out of harm's way. If you have a keen eye, you can actually tell what power Vecna is about to use. All 4 of them have different animations, and you can tell which one he's doing by his hands. Here's what Fly looks like, here's what the skeletons look like, here's where the hand looks like, and here's what the orb looks like.
Well, there you guys go. 3+ counters to every single killer in Dead by Daylight. I hope you guys did enjoy. Majority of the work has been done by some awesome people, so make sure you check out everybody in the description down below and show them some awesome love. If you guys have any other tips, advanced, basic, unknown, leave them down in the comments below, and maybe I'll make a part 2 to this video. I hope you guys really did enjoy. This video did take a while to produce. Thank you guys so much for the support on the previous one. If you want to continue to support, make sure you're subscribing down below, leaving a like on this video, sharing it with your friends. Our Discord is open. Make sure you guys are joining up as well. And starting on Monday, we are back on Twitch streaming schedule every single weekday from 12:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's going to do it for me. As always, I'm the King. I tip my crown to you guys, and we'll see you in the fog.